The dust swirled around Eleanor's boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Cheyenne, her worn carpet bag clutched tightly in both hands. The Wyoming wind cut through her traveling dress like a blade. Nothing like the gentle Kansas breezes she'd known all her 26 years. She pressed the letter against her chest through the fabric of her coat pocket, the paper now soft from countless readings during the 3-day journey. "Miss, you sure someone's coming for you?" The driver peered down from his perch, tobacco juice staining his gray beard. "Don't like leaving a lady alone out here?" Eleanor forced a smile that didn't reach her hazel eyes. "Mr. James Callahan will be here presently. He's expecting me." The driver shrugged and cracked his whip. The stagecoach lurched away, leaving Eleanor standing beside the wooden platform with dust settling on her dark hair. She watched until it disappeared beyond the ridge, taking with it her last connection to the life she'd fled. 2 weeks ago, she'd been Eleanor Hartley, the spinster daughter of a failed merchant, jilted at the altar by William Morrison. Too plain, he'd told her father, as if she were livestock being appraised. Too late for love at her age. I need a younger bride, one who can give me many sons. The humiliation had burned worse than the rejection. The whole town of Lawrence knew within hours. Whispers followed her to church, to the general store, even to her own garden gate. Her younger sister, married these 5 years, had looked at her with such pity that Eleanor wanted to scream. Then came the advertisement in the Matrimonial Times, hidden between notices for farmhands and machinery. Respectable gentleman rancher in Wyoming Territory seeks correspondence with marriage-minded lady of good character. James Callahan, Elk Ridge Ranch. His letters had been brief but kind, his handwriting careful. He needed a wife, he wrote, someone strong enough for frontier life. He promised a good home, respect, and partnership. Love wasn't mentioned, but Eleanor no longer believed in fairy tales. She wanted escape, purpose, a place where her past couldn't follow. Now, standing in the growing shadows of late afternoon, she wondered if she'd simply traded one folly for another. The town stretched before her, rough wooden buildings, saloons already loud with evening trade, men in dusty clothes eyeing her with curiosity. No one approached. An hour passed. The sun dipped lower, painting the mountains crimson. Eleanor's feet ached, and fear crept cold up her spine. What if he'd changed his mind? What if this was all some cruel joke? She had $12 sewn into her corset, not enough for passage home, barely enough for a room. "You waiting on someone, miss?" Eleanor startled. A tall man stood beside a weather-beaten wagon, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Something in his stance, the way his shoulders set rigid beneath his coat, made her step back. "Mr. Callahan?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Thomas Callahan." His voice was gravelly, tired. "James was my brother." Was. The word hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "I don't understand. His last letter was only a month ago." "James died 6 months back. Broke his neck when his horse threw him." Thomas lifted his head, and Eleanor saw his face clearly for the first time. Younger than she'd expected, maybe 32 or 3, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, and stubble shadowed his jaw. Grief had carved lines around his mouth. "But the letters!" Eleanor's mind reeled. "What letters?" His eyes narrowed. "Lady, I don't know what scheme you're running, but—" "No scheme." Eleanor pulled out the bundle of correspondence, her hands shaking. "Look, James Callahan, Elk Ridge Ranch. We've been writing for 2 months. He sent for me, paid my passage." Thomas snatched the letters, scanning them in the dying light. His face went from suspicious to confused to something Eleanor couldn't read. "This isn't James's writing. But it's signed." "I said it ain't his writing." He thrust the letters back at her. "James couldn't write more than his own name, and he sure as hell didn't send for any mail-order bride." The words mail-order bride stung worse than William's rejection. Eleanor felt her cheeks burn. "Then who?" "Don't know. Don't care." Thomas turned toward his wagon. "There's a boarding house on 2nd Street. Mrs. Palmer runs a decent place. Wait! Desperation made her bold. She grabbed his sleeve. Please, Mr. Callahan, I have nowhere to go. I spent everything to come here. He shook her off, but not roughly. Up close, she could see exhaustion etched in every line of his body. That's not my problem. Miss Eleanor Hartley. She straightened her spine, summoning what dignity she had left. And you're right, it's not your problem. But I'm asking for help anyway. Just a few days, until I can find work. Earn passage home. Papa, a small voice interrupted. Eleanor looked down to see two children peering from the wagon bed, a girl with tangled dark braids and a younger boy sucking his thumb. Papa, who's the lady? The girl's eyes were huge, the same storm gray as her father's. Nobody. Clara, sit back down. But Clara had already scrambled over the wagon side, her brother following. They stood before Eleanor in patched clothes and bare feet despite the cold, studying her with the frank curiosity of children. Are you the lady Uncle James was going to marry? Clara asked. Thomas's jaw clenched. Clara, get back in the wagon. But Mrs. Weber said Uncle James was getting a wife before he died. She said maybe the lady would still come and cook for us and fix Sam's shirts and... Clara! The sharpness in Thomas's voice made both children flinch. The boy, Sam, started to cry silently, tears rolling down his dirty cheeks. Something broke inside Eleanor at the sight. These motherless children, their grieving father, this horrible mistake that had brought her here. It was too much. She knelt in the dust, bringing herself to Sam's eye level. Hello, Sam, she said softly. That's a fine name. I had a cousin named Samuel. The boy's tears slowed. He studied her with solemn eyes, then reached out one grubby hand to touch the silver pin on her collar. Pretty, he whispered. Sam doesn't talk much. Clara informed her importantly. Not since Mama went to heaven with the baby. Thomas made a sound like he'd been punched. That's enough. Both of you, in the wagon. Now! But Clara had grabbed Eleanor's hand. Please come home with us. We got room. Papa made the loft bigger for Uncle James's wife. And I can show you my doll. She only got one arm, but she's still good. And Sam needs someone to sing to him at night 'cause Papa don't know any songs. I said enough. Thomas scooped up both children, depositing them in the wagon despite Clara's protests. Then he turned on Eleanor, and she saw something wild in his eyes, pain or fear, or both. Look, Miss Hartley, I'm sorry you came all this way for nothing, but I've got no use for a woman at the ranch. We manage fine on our own. Eleanor looked at the children huddled in the wagon, Clara's rebellion already fading to dejection. Sam curled into himself like a wounded animal. She thought of the boarding house on 2nd Street, her dwindling funds, the long journey back to more humiliation. 3 days, she heard herself say. Give me 3 days to earn my keep while I figure out what to do. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm not asking for charity. I'll work for my board. We don't need... Your son's shirt is torn at both elbows. Your daughter's hair hasn't seen a proper brush in weeks. And forgive me for saying so, but you look like you haven't had a decent meal in months. Eleanor met his glare steadily. 3 days. Mr. Callahan, what harm could it do? The silence stretched between them. Clara whispered something to Sam. A saloon piano started up somewhere, the tinny notes carrying on the wind. Finally, Thomas's shoulders sagged. 3 days, he said quietly. Not an hour more, and you sleep in the house, not the barn. I won't have folks talking more than they already do. Eleanor released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Thank you. He helped her into the wagon with reluctant courtesy, then climbed up to take the reins. The children immediately pressed close to Eleanor, Clara chattering about everything they passed while Sam simply leaned against her side, his small weight trusting and warm. As they left Cheyenne behind, heading into the vast darkness of the prairie, Eleanor wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The stars emerged one by one, cold and distant as the life she'd left behind. Somewhere out there was Elk Ridge Ranch, a place she'd imagined so differently in her dreams. The wagon rolled on through the night, carrying its strange cargo. A bitter widower, 2 motherless children, and a woman with nowhere else to go. None of them could know that fate, in the form of a forged letter, had just changed all their lives forever. The first morning at Elk Ridge Ranch. Eleanor woke to find frost patterns on the window and her breath visible in the cold air. The loft Thomas had mentioned was sparse but clean, a narrow bed, a washstand, and hooks for clothing. Through the thin walls, she could hear movement below, the scrape of chairs, Sam's soft whimper, Clara's voice trying to soothe him. Eleanor dressed quickly in her plainest work dress and descended the ladder. The main room served as kitchen, dining, and living space all in one. Thomas stood at the stove, his back to her, attempting to scrape something blackened from a pan. The children sat at the rough wooden table, Sam's face streaked with fresh tears, Clara looking mutinous. "I hate porridge," Clara announced to no one in particular. "It tastes like paste." "Then don't eat it," Thomas said without turning around. The weariness in his voice suggested this was an old battle. Eleanor surveyed the scene, the burned pan, the pot of gray lumpy porridge, the nearly empty woodbox, the dishes piled high. Without asking permission, she took the pan from Thomas's hands. He stiffened but didn't protest. "Clara, would you show me where your father keeps the eggs?" Eleanor kept her voice light. "And Sam, could you be my special helper and bring in some kindling?" Both children perked up at having tasks. As they scurried off, Eleanor felt Thomas watching her. She didn't meet his eyes, busying herself with salvaging breakfast. The pantry was better stocked than she'd expected. Flour, salt pork, preserved vegetables, even some precious coffee. Someone had provided well. They just needed someone who knew how to use it. Within 20 minutes, she had flapjacks sizzling on the griddle and coffee brewing. The aroma brought the children running back. Even Thomas edged closer, though he maintained his distance like a wary wolf. "How do you make them smell like that?" Clara asked, watching Eleanor flip the golden cakes. "Secret ingredient," Eleanor whispered conspiratorially. "A little sugar in the batter, don't tell." Clara giggled, the first truly joyful sound Eleanor had heard from her. Sam climbed onto a chair, eyes fixed on the food with an intensity that made Eleanor's heart ache. When had these children last had a proper meal? She served them first, adding a drizzle of molasses she'd found hidden behind the flour. Thomas she served last, setting the plate down without comment and turning back to the stove. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of eager eating. Sam said suddenly, his small voice clear. "Good." Clara dropped her fork. Thomas's head snapped up. They all stared at the boy, who continued eating as if he hadn't just spoken his first words in who knew how long. He hasn't." Thomas's voice cracked. He pushed back from the table abruptly and strode outside, leaving the door swinging behind him. Eleanor watched him go, noting how his shoulders shook. She turned back to the children, who looked uncertain now, afraid their tentative happiness had somehow caused harm. "Your papa just needs a moment," she said gently. "Sometimes when good things happen after sad times, it can feel overwhelming, like sunshine after a long storm. It hurts your eyes at first." Clara nodded solemnly. "Papa cries sometimes at night. We pretend we don't hear." The matter-of-fact words broke Eleanor's heart. She busied herself clearing plates, giving the children tasks to keep them occupied. Through the window, she could see Thomas by the corral, his hands braced on the fence, head bowed. The day fell into a rhythm. Eleanor cleaned while the children shadowed her every move. Clara chattered non-stop, starved for female attention, while Sam communicated through touches and small smiles. The house, she discovered, had good bones beneath the neglect. Margaret Callahan, Thomas's late wife, had made a real home here once. Eleanor found evidence everywhere. Carefully sewn curtains now gray with dust, a rocking chair worn smooth from use, pencil marks on the door frame marking the children's growth. "Mama made the best apple pie," Clara informed her as Eleanor scrubbed the kitchen table. "She said I could learn when I got bigger, but then she went to heaven." Tell me about her, Eleanor said carefully. Clara's face lit up. For the next hour, Eleanor heard about Margaret Callahan, how she sang while she worked, how she knew every star's name, how she laughed at Thomas's terrible jokes, how she'd been excited about the new baby, choosing names, sewing tiny clothes, how she'd gotten sick after the birth, fevered and weak, slipping away as the baby followed her 3 days later. Papa wouldn't name him, Clara said quietly. The preacher did it, Matthew, but Papa never says it. Eleanor's hand stilled on the washing. Through the window, she saw Thomas working with a horse, his movements precise but mechanical. A man going through motions, not living. By afternoon, she had bread rising and stew simmering. The children helped her gather eggs, Sam proud when she praised his careful handling. They were returning to the house when a wagon approached, driven by a stern-faced woman in black. Mrs. Weber, Clara whispered, shrinking against Eleanor's skirts. The woman climbed down, eyeing Eleanor with sharp disapproval. So, you're the mail-order bride who showed up despite everything. Eleanor straightened her spine. I'm Eleanor Hartley. I'm helping Mr. Callahan for a few days while I make arrangements to return east. Helping. Mrs. Weber's tone made the word sound scandalous. A single woman, living with a widower. You do realize how this looks? I realize these children needed a decent meal and clean clothes, Eleanor replied evenly. Mrs. Weber's eyes narrowed. Margaret Callahan was my dear friend. To see another woman in her kitchen so soon, Mama would want someone to make Sam talk again, Clara burst out suddenly. She would. She'd want Papa to stop being sad and for someone to brush my hair and tell us stories. Mrs. Weber's face softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. Child, there are proper ways to do things. Your father should hire a housekeeper, not take in strays. Thomas appeared then, drawn by the voices. His face darkened seeing Mrs. Weber's wagon. Afternoon, Constance. Thomas, she looked between him and Eleanor meaningfully. I came to check on the children. I see the rumors in town were true. Miss Hartley is leaving in 2 days. Thomas said shortly. Nothing improper about Christian charity. Others might not see it that way. Mrs. Weber climbed back onto her wagon. I'll be praying for you all, especially for propriety and wisdom. After she left, Thomas turned on Eleanor. This is what I meant. Folks here talk. A widow takes in washing. A spinster teaches school. They don't live with unmarried men. I'm not living with you, Eleanor shot back, surprising herself with her vehemence. I'm working for room and board, temporarily. If Mrs. Weber is so concerned about propriety, where was she when these children were eating burned porridge? Thomas's jaw clenched. We were managing. Were you? Eleanor gestured to Sam, who had pressed himself against her side during the confrontation. Your son just started speaking again. Doesn't that mean something? For a moment, something raw flickered in Thomas's eyes. Then the walls came back up. 2 more days. Miss Hartley, that was our agreement. He strode to the barn, his refuge from anything that threatened the careful emptiness he'd built around himself. Eleanor watched him go, frustrated and oddly hurt. She'd been dismissed by men before. Too plain, too old, too much, but this felt different. This wasn't about her at all. That evening, after a supper Thomas ate in silence. Eleanor told the children stories by the fire. Sam curled in her lap while Clara leaned against her shoulder. She spun tales of brave princesses and kind dragons, of children who found magic in ordinary things. Thomas sat in the shadows, supposedly mending harness but really listening. She could feel his attention like a physical weight. When the children finally dozed off, Eleanor carried Sam to his small bed, Clara stumbling sleepily after. She tucked them in, humming softly, smoothing hair back from peaceful faces. Such trust in sleep, such innocence despite their losses. Returning to the main room, she found Thomas standing by the fire, staring into the flames. The harness lay forgotten. They haven't been that quiet at bedtime since. He stopped, jaw working. Since before. Eleanor began tidying quietly, giving him space. Finally, he spoke again, so low she almost missed it. She was everything good in this place, everything warm and bright and living. When she died, she took it all with her. He pressed a hand to his eyes. I couldn't even hold our son. Couldn't look at him. And then he was gone too. And I was glad. God help me. I was glad I didn't have to see her in his face every day. The raw confession hung between them. Eleanor's hand stilled on the dish she was drying. Grief makes us think terrible things sometimes, she said softly. It doesn't make us terrible people. Thomas laughed bitterly. You don't know me, Miss Hartley. You don't know what I've become. I know you get up every day and care for your children. I know you keep this ranch running. I know you're still here, still trying, even when it hurts to breathe. Eleanor set down the dish, meeting his haunted eyes. That's not nothing, Mr. Callahan. That's everything. He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, without a word, he grabbed his coat and left. Eleanor heard the barn door slam, saw the faint glow of a lantern through the cracks. She finished cleaning, banked the fire, and climbed to her cold loft. But sleep wouldn't come. She thought of Thomas alone in that barn, of 2 children starved for affection, of her own foolish journey chasing a ghost's promise. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, the sound lonely enough to break hearts. Tomorrow she would have to start making plans to leave. The thought sat like lead in her stomach. Not because she had nowhere to go. She'd survived worse. But because somewhere between this morning's breakfast and tonight's bedtime stories, these 3 broken people had begun to feel like something she'd been searching for all along. Something that might have been home. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, first as a softening in the wind, then as tiny green shoots pushing through the melting snow. Eleanor had been at Elk Ridge Ranch for 6 weeks now, her initial 3 days extending through a series of unspoken agreements. Each Sunday, Thomas would mention her leaving. Each Monday, she would simply continue as if he hadn't spoken. The morning she first saw him smile, really smile, she was struggling with the garden plot behind the house. The ground was still hard, resisting her efforts to prepare it for planting. Sweat dripped down her back despite the cool air. You're holding the hoe wrong, Thomas said from behind her. Eleanor jumped, then scowled. I suppose you know a better way? Maybe. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and coffee that always clung to him. May I? She handed over the tool. Stepping back, Thomas worked the ground with practiced efficiency, breaking up the clods she'd been fighting. But what stopped her breath was the slight upturn of his mouth when Clara came running out with Sam, both children eager to help. Can we plant flowers for Mama? Clara asked. She loved the blue ones. Thomas's smile faltered but didn't disappear. Columbines. Yes, we can plant some for her. That became their first real project together. Thomas taught Eleanor about Wyoming soil, about what would grow in the harsh climate. His hands sometimes covered hers on the tools, showing proper technique. Each touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the spring sun. Sam had become her constant shadow, speaking more each day. His vocabulary was still limited, but his smiles were frequent. Clara bloomed too, chattering about school friends, showing off her improving reading skills, helping with household tasks without being asked. The house itself had transformed. Clean windows let in light. Fresh bread cooled on the table daily. Mended clothes hung neatly on pegs. But more than that, laughter had returned, tentative at first, then fuller as the days passed. One evening, as Eleanor served dinner, Thomas caught her wrist gently. This was Margaret's recipe, he said, looking at the pot roast. How did you... Clara found her receipt book, Eleanor explained. I hope you don't mind. I don't mind. His thumb moved slightly against her wrist before he released her. It's good to taste it again. These moments accumulated like spring rain. Thomas teaching her to ride the gentlest mare, his hands steadying her waist. Eleanor showing him how to braid Clara's hair properly, their fingers tangling in the dark strands. Shared glances over the children's heads. Conversations by the fire that stretched later each night. But the past haunted them still. Eleanor would catch Thomas staring at Margaret's rocking chair. She'd see him pause at the threshold of what had been the nursery, now a storage room, and sometimes she'd wake to hear him pacing below, wrestling with ghosts she couldn't banish. The day everything shifted started innocently. Eleanor was sorting through a trunk in the attic, looking for summer clothes for the children. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue, lay a dress, cream-colored silk with tiny pearl buttons, yellowed with age but still beautiful. A wedding dress. Eleanor lifted it carefully, mesmerized. She'd never owned anything so fine. Without thinking, she held it against herself. It would fit, she realized. Margaret had been about her size. "What are you doing?" Thomas's voice from the ladder made her spin around. His face had gone white, then red, his eyes blazing with fury. "I'm sorry, I was just looking for—" "Put it back." His voice was deadly quiet. "Put it back right now." Eleanor's hands trembled as she rewrapped the dress. "Thomas, I didn't mean—" "Don't!" He backed down the ladder. "Just don't." She heard his boots on the stairs, the slam of the front door. Through the small window, she watched him saddle his horse and ride out, not toward the usual pastures, but toward town, or perhaps just away from her. Clara found her crying in the kitchen an hour later. The child said nothing, just climbed into Eleanor's lap and hugged her tight. "Papa gets mad when he's scared," Clara whispered. "Mama told me that once." "What's he scared of?" Eleanor asked, though she thought she knew. "Loving somebody new," Clara said simply. "He thinks it means forgetting Mama." The wisdom of children. Eleanor held Clara close, breathing in her little girl's scent of dirt and sunshine. Sam joined them, patting Eleanor's knee with solemn sympathy. Thomas didn't return for supper, or for bedtime stories. Eleanor tucked the children in, her heart heavy. She'd crossed a line, trespassed on sacred ground. Tomorrow she would have to leave. The thought made her chest tight with grief. She was banking the fire when she heard his horse return. The barn door creaked. Time passed, too much time. Fear prickled her spine. Eleanor grabbed her shawl and ventured outside. She found Thomas in the barn, sitting in the straw with a half-empty bottle beside him. He looked up at her approach, his eyes glassy with drink and pain. "Shouldn't be out here," he slurred. "Not proper. Neither is drinking alone in a barn." Eleanor sat beside him, ignoring propriety. "Thomas, I'm sorry about the dress. I wasn't thinking." He laughed bitterly. "She looked beautiful in it, like an angel. I told her so every anniversary when she'd put it on just to dance with me in the kitchen." His voice broke. I can't see another woman in it. Can't replace her. I'm not trying to replace her." Eleanor's own voice was thick with tears. "How could I? She gave you beautiful children. She made this house a home. She's part of everything here." Thomas turned to look at her then. Really look at her. "Then what are you doing, Eleanor? Why are you still here?" The use of her first name made her shiver. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came here by mistake, running from my own failures. But somewhere along the way, I stopped running. This place, the children, you—" She paused, gathering courage. "I've never felt needed before. Not like this. Needed," he repeated softly. His hand found hers in the straw. "Is that all it is?" Eleanor's heart hammered. "You know it's not." The barn was silent except for the horse's breathing and the rustle of straw. Thomas's fingers intertwined with hers, his calloused thumb stroking her palm. "I dream about you," he confessed roughly. "Wake up reaching for you. Then I remember Margaret, and the guilt—" He squeezed his eyes shut. "I'm betraying her memory." "No." Eleanor shifted closer, daring to touch his face. "You're living. Thomas, there's a difference." He leaned into her palm, eyes still closed. "I don't know how to do this, how to want you and honor her and protect the children all at once. We go slow," Eleanor whispered. "We be honest with each other and the children. We build something new without tearing down what was. Thomas opened his eyes, searching hers. What he found there made him lean closer. Their lips met, tentative, gentle, tasting of tears and whiskey and possibility. Eleanor's free hand tangled in his hair as he deepened the kiss, pulling her closer with desperate tenderness. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not for 3 days or 3 weeks. Stay." "Thomas, I know I'm broken. I know I have nothing to offer but hard work and ghosts and 2 children who aren't yours. But Eleanor, this house has been so cold, and you've brought warmth back to it, to us." His voice roughened. "To me." Eleanor's tears spilled over. "You're not broken. You're healing. We all are." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise more than passion. They stayed in the barn talking until the moon was high, sharing stories of loss and hope, planning tentative futures. When Thomas walked her back to the house, he held her hand openly. Propriety be damned. At the door, he stopped. "The children, we need to talk to them. Make sure they understand." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "I think they already do. Clara informed me last week that I should marry you so she could call me Mama without feeling guilty." Thomas's surprised laugh was the most beautiful sound she'd heard. That little schemer gets it from her mother. All the best qualities do. Eleanor said softly. He pulled her close once more, this kiss deeper, hungrier. When they parted, both knew something fundamental had shifted. The guilt would linger. Healing isn't linear, but it no longer stood alone. Hope had taken root beside it, stubborn as the spring flowers pushing through Wyoming snow. "Good night, Eleanor," Thomas murmured against her lips. "Good night, Thomas." She climbed to her loft on unsteady legs, her mouth still tingling, her heart so full it ached. Below, she heard Thomas moving about, no longer pacing but preparing for bed with purpose. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Mrs. Weber's disapproval, the town's gossip, the complex navigation of a family stitching itself together from broken pieces. But tonight, Eleanor fell asleep smiling, her fingers pressed to her lips, treasuring the gift of being chosen by a man who'd thought his choosing days were done. Spring had truly come to Elk Ridge Ranch at last. The blizzard struck without warning on a moonless night in late spring. Eleanor woke to the sound of wind howling like wolves and snow beating against the windows. The temperature had plummeted, turning the promise of warmth into a cruel joke. She heard movement below and found Thomas stoking the fire, his face grim in the orange light. "Late storm," he said without looking up. "Happens sometimes. We'll lose some cattle if this keeps up." Clara's cry cut through the wind screaming. Eleanor rushed to the children's room, finding the girl sitting up in bed, her face flushed and eyes glassy with fever. Sam stood beside her, patting her hand with worried little touches. "My head hurts," Clara whimpered. "Everything hurts." Eleanor felt the child's forehead and fought to keep the alarm off her face. Burning hot. She'd seen fevers before, helped nurse neighbors through illness, but this felt different, dangerous. "Thomas," she called, keeping her voice steady. "Clara's sick." He appeared in the doorway, took one look at his daughter, and the color drained from his face. Eleanor saw the ghost of old tragedy in his eyes, another sick bed, another fever, another potential loss. "We need the doctor," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll go." "No." Thomas was already pulling on his coat. "I know the way better. The storm." He stopped, torn between his children. "I'll take care of her," Eleanor promised. "I know what to do. Go." He hesitated, then crossed to kiss Clara's burning forehead. "Papa will bring help. Little bird, be brave." To Eleanor, he whispered. "The willow bark tea in the pantry, cool cloths. Don't let the fever get too high." His hand gripped hers briefly, desperately. "Don't let me lose her, too." Then he was gone, swallowed by the white fury outside. Eleanor heard his horse's whinny of protest, then nothing but wind. She turned to find Sam watching her with solemn eyes. "Help," he said clearly. "Want to help? Good boy." Eleanor forced calm into her voice. "Fetch the basin from the kitchen. We're going to cool your sister down." The next hours blurred together. Clara's fever climbed despite Eleanor's efforts. The child tossed and moaned, sometimes calling for her mother, sometimes just whimpering. Eleanor bathed her with cool water, coaxed sips of willow bark tea between cracked lips, sang every lullaby she knew. Sam proved invaluable, fetching fresh water, holding his sister's hand, never complaining despite his exhaustion. When Clara's thrashing grew violent, he climbed into bed beside her, his small presence seeming to calm her. "Story," he demanded around midnight. Clara liked stories. So Eleanor told stories, rambling tales of princesses and dragons, of brave children who defeated winter witches, of spring flowers that could cure any illness. Her voice grew hoarse, but she didn't stop. Words were all she had against the fever's grip. By 3 a.m, Clara was delirious. She didn't recognize Eleanor, kept asking for her mother, trying to get out of bed to find her. Eleanor had to physically hold her down during the worst spells, tears streaming down her own face. "Please," she found herself praying. "Please don't take her. They've lost too much already. Please." Sam had finally dozed off, curled against his sister like a protective puppy. Eleanor checked the window. Nothing but swirling white. How long did it take to reach town? What if Thomas had gotten lost? What if his horse had stumbled? What if... She forced the thoughts away, one crisis at a time. Clara's breathing grew labored around 4. The child's chest rattled with each breath, and her fever showed no signs of breaking. Eleanor had seen this before, the turning point where a soul decided whether to stay or go. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely to the little girl. "Don't you dare leave us. Your papa needs you, Sam needs you, and I—" Her voice broke. "I need you too, sweet girl. You can't make me love you and then leave." She gathered Clara in her arms, rocking her like the baby she'd once been. The child was so light, bird bones and fevered skin. Eleanor sang Margaret's favorite hymn. Clara had taught it to her weeks ago, and pressed kisses to the burning forehead. "Your mama's watching," she murmured. "But she's not ready for you yet. She wants you to grow up first, to take care of Sam and your papa, to learn to make apple pie and plant columbines, to be the wonderful woman she knows you'll become." Whether it was the words or coincidence, Clara's breathing eased slightly. She turned her face into Eleanor's chest, seeking comfort even in delirium. Eleanor held her tighter, as if love alone could anchor a child to earth. The first gray light of dawn was seeping through the storm when Eleanor heard it. Horses, multiple horses. She laid Clara gently back on the bed and flew to the window. 3 riders materialized from the white: Thomas, Dr. Morrison, and Reverend Palmer. She met them at the door, snow swirling in with them. Thomas's face was haggard, ice in his beard, but his eyes blazed with desperate hope. "She's still fighting," Eleanor told him. "The fever hasn't broken, but she's still here." Dr. Morrison, a competent man in his 50s, pushed past them. "Let me see the child." What followed was organized chaos. The doctor examined Clara with professional efficiency while Thomas hovered. Eleanor fetched supplies, and the Reverend kept Sam occupied in the kitchen. Doctor Morrison produced bottles from his bag: quinine, laudanum, something else Eleanor didn't recognize. "Fever's dangerous high," he said bluntly. "But she's young, strong. We'll know by nightfall." He showed Eleanor how to administer the medicines, praised her cooling efforts, instructed Thomas to keep the room ventilated despite the cold. Then he did something that surprised Eleanor. He sat beside Clara's bed and simply talked to her. Nonsense about his own granddaughter, about spring calves, about anything except sickness and death. "Sometimes they need to hear life going on around them," he explained. "Gives them reason to stay." The storm blew itself out by midday, leaving the world wrapped in pristine white. The Reverend left to check on other families. Dr. Morrison stayed, dozing in the kitchen between rounds of checking Clara. Thomas never left his daughter's side, holding her hand, whispering promises about ponies and pretty dresses and all the things they'd do when she was well. Eleanor kept everyone fed and the medicines on schedule. She caught Thomas watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't read, gratitude mixed with something deeper, more primal. Once, when she brought him coffee, he caught her hand. "You stayed," he said simply. "Through all of this, you stayed." "Where else would I be?" she replied, squeezing his fingers. "This is my family, too." The words hung between them, a declaration and a claim. Evening came slowly, purple shadows creeping across the snow. Clara had been quiet for hours, her breathing shallow but steady. Then, as Eleanor was lighting the lamps, the child stirred. "Papa?" Her voice was weak but lucid. "I'm thirsty." Thomas made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "That's my girl. Eleanor will get you water." Clara's eyes focused on Eleanor, truly seeing her for the first time in 20 hours. "You're still here," she said wonderingly. "I dreamed you left." "Never," Eleanor promised, smoothing damp hair from the child's forehead. Cooler now, the fever finally breaking. "I'm never leaving, Doctor." Morrison confirmed what they could feel. The crisis had passed. Clara would need weeks to fully recover, but she would recover. He packed his bags, refused all payment except a promise of Eleanor's apple pie when next he visited, and rode home through the deepening dusk. That night, after Clara had taken broth and fallen into healing sleep, after Sam had been persuaded to his own bed, Eleanor found Thomas standing in the snow behind the house. She wrapped her shawl around both their shoulders, leaning into his warmth. "I thought I'd lose her," he said roughly. "Like Margaret, like the baby. I thought—" Eleanor turned in his arms, cupping his face. "But you didn't." "She's strong, like her father, like her mother was." Thomas studied her face in the moonlight. "You saved her. You fought for her when I couldn't even stay in the room." "We saved her," Eleanor corrected. "All of us. That's what families do." He kissed her then, deep and desperate and grateful. His hands tangled in her hair, holding her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said suddenly. "I know we said slow, but Eleanor, tonight proved what I already knew. I can't do this without you. We can't. The children need you. I need you." Eleanor's heart stopped, then raced. "Thomas, I'm not asking out of gratitude or propriety or convenience." His voice grew fierce. "I'm asking because I love you. Because this house is only home when you're in it. Because when I thought I might lose Clara, the only thing that kept me sane was knowing you were here fighting for her." "Yes," Eleanor breathed, tears coursing down her cheeks. "Yes, Thomas, yes." He spun her around in the snow, both of them laughing and crying at once. From the house came Sam's voice. "Papa, Eleanor, Clara wants cocoa." They walked back hand in hand, pausing at the threshold. Through the window, they could see Clara propped up in bed, Sam beside her, both children waiting for the adults who made their world complete. "No more mail-order bride." Thomas murmured, "You're home now. We all are." Eleanor squeezed his hand, thinking of the strange journey that had brought her here, a fraudulent letter, a dead man's promise, a bitter widower, and 2 broken children. Somehow, from all that loss and confusion, love had grown wild as columbines in spring. "Home," she agreed, and followed her future husband inside to tend their daughter. Word of Thomas's proposal spread through the valley like wildfire. By week's end, Eleanor couldn't visit the general store without facing stares and whispers. Some were merely curious, but others held judgment sharp as winter wind. "Shameless. Mrs." Weber pronounced loudly as Eleanor selected flour. "Living in sin for months, and now expecting us to celebrate their union as if it were proper." Eleanor's hands trembled on the flour sack, but before she could respond, "Old Mrs." Bridger spoke up from near the canned goods. "Nonsense, Constance. That woman brought life back to the Callahan Ranch. Any fool can see those children are thriving." The elderly woman's eyes were kind as she addressed Eleanor directly. "Pay her no mind. Dear, Some folks would rather see a family suffer properly than heal improperly. But Mrs. Weber wasn't finished. Margaret hasn't been cold a year, 15 months. Eleanor interrupted quietly. Margaret Callahan passed 15 months ago. I know because Clara counts the days. She marks them in her primer. Her voice grew stronger. Those children were drowning in grief when I arrived. Now they laugh again. If that offends you, perhaps you should examine why. She left without the flower, hands shaking with anger and hurt. Outside, she nearly collided with Reverend Palmer, who steadied her gently. Miss Hartley, I heard the good news from Thomas. I'd be honored to perform the ceremony. His easy acceptance almost undid her. Reverend, there are those who think, I think, he said firmly, that God works in mysterious ways, a fraudulent letter bringing hope to a broken family. If that's not divine intervention, I don't know what is. But the criticism intensified as the week wore on. Anonymous notes appeared under the ranch door. Jezebel, gold digger, false mother. Each one cut deep, even as Thomas burned them in the stove with grim fury. The worst came on Saturday. Eleanor had taken the children to town for supplies, leaving them with kindly Mrs. Bridger while she visited the seamstress about altering her wedding dress. Thomas had insisted, saying Margaret would want it worn with joy again. She emerged to find a cluster of women surrounding Clara and Sam. Mrs. Weber's voice carried clearly. Your dear mother must be turning in her grave. Children, to see another woman in her place so soon. Stop. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. She pushed through the group to gather the children against her. Clara was crying silently, Sam's face buried in Eleanor's skirts. How dare you? Eleanor continued, her voice low but carrying. How dare you speak of their mother to cause them pain? Margaret Callahan loved these children above all else. Do you think she'd want them suffering to prove some point about proper mourning? You didn't know her. Mrs. Weber started. No, I didn't, but I know her through her children's memories, through the home she built, through the man she loved who nearly died of grief losing her. Eleanor's voice rose. I know she planted columbines every spring and sang while she cooked and read stories even when she was tired. I know because her family tells me, honors her by sharing her with me. She looked around the group, meeting each eye. I'm not trying to replace Margaret Callahan. I'm trying to help her family live again. If that makes me shameful in your eyes, so be it. But leave these children out of your righteousness. Eleanor swept the children away, head high despite the tears threatening. But she heard Mrs. Bridger's voice behind them. Well said. Margaret was my friend too. Constance, and I say she'd approve. That woman loves those babies like her own. Back at the ranch, Eleanor tried to hide her distress, but Thomas read it in every line of her body. After the children were in bed, he held her by the fire. We could leave, he said quietly. Start fresh somewhere else. Run away. Eleanor pulled back to look at him. Thomas, this is your home, your father's land, where you built a life with Margaret. I won't be the reason you leave. You're the reason I want to stay, he corrected. But not if it means you facing this treatment. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Bridger defended me today. So did Reverend Palmer. Not everyone thinks poorly of us, but enough do to hurt you. She turned in his arms, fierce now. I've been hurt before, called plain, unwanted, past my prime. I survived that. I'll survive this too, because what we have is worth more than their approval. Thomas searched her face. You're sure? I'm sure I love you. I'm sure I love those children. The rest is just noise. He kissed her deeply, and they stayed entwined until the fire burned low. But sleep brought no peace. Eleanor dreamed of accusing faces, of Clara crying, of being driven from another home in shame. She woke to find Thomas already gone, the morning chores calling. Eleanor rose and dressed, trying to shake off the nightmare. Today was Sunday. They'd planned to announce their engagement formally at church. But now, Eleanor? Clara appeared in her nightgown. Are you sad? Eleanor forced a smile. Just tired. Sweet one. Mrs. Weber made you sad. I hate her. Oh, Clara, no. Eleanor drew the child close. Mrs. Weber is just worried about change. Sometimes when people are scared, they say hurtful things. Were you scared when you came here? Eleanor considered lying, then chose truth. Terrified. Everything was different and uncertain. But you stayed. Yes. Because you love us? Because I love you. Clara squeezed her tight. Then Mrs. Weber is wrong. Mama sent you to us. I know she did. Sam joined them, crawling into the embrace without words. Eleanor held both children, drawing strength from their simple faith. Thomas returned to find them like that. Family meeting, he announced. We need to decide about church. They sat around the table, even Sam listening seriously. Some folks will be unkind. Thomas said carefully. We could skip today. No, Clara interrupted. Mama always said we don't hide from hard things. That's my brave girl. But Eleanor, we'll hold her head high. Eleanor finished. We've done nothing wrong. Love isn't shameful. So they went. The church hushed when they entered, every eye following their progress to the Callahan pew. Eleanor felt the weight of judgment, curiosity, and, surprisingly, some approval. Reverend Palmer's sermon seemed pointed. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. His eyes found Eleanor's. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. After the service, they stood to leave. The congregation seemed to hold its breath. Then Mrs. Bridger, bless her, bustled over. Eleanor, dear, I'm organizing the church social next month. I do hope you'll help with the pies. Yours are becoming quite famous. It was an olive branch, publicly offered. Eleanor accepted gratefully. Others followed. Not many, but enough. The Hendersons mentioned needing a new school teacher come fall. Mr. Chen from the general store promised to order special fabric for her wedding dress. Mrs. Weber and her circle swept past without acknowledgement, but their cut direct had lost some sting. Thomas's hand on Eleanor's back was warm, steadying. The children chattered with their friends, already moving past the morning's tension. As they climbed into the wagon, Eleanor felt something shift, not acceptance, that would take time, but possibility. She wasn't the Scarlet Woman anymore, just a woman who'd chosen love over propriety. That wasn't so bad, Thomas murmured as they drove home. Eleanor laughed, surprising herself. No, it wasn't, though I could do without the whispers. They'll find something else to gossip about soon enough. Thomas Callahan, are you suggesting our engagement is merely gossip? He grinned, looking younger than she'd ever seen him. The most scandalous gossip this valley's seen in years. A mysterious woman, a grieving widower, a fraudulent letter. Why, it's practically a penny dreadful. Mama? What's a penny dreadful? Clara piped up. A silly story, Eleanor said, catching Thomas's eye. Though sometimes silly stories have happy endings. That afternoon, unexpected visitors arrived. Dr. Morrison and his wife, bringing a cake. The Changs from the neighboring ranch, offering congratulations. Even gruff Ben Tucker, Thomas's nearest neighbor, stopped by to shake hands and mutter something about high time. Each visit was brief but meaningful. The community, it seemed, was divided but not uniformly against them. Those who knew Thomas best, who'd watched his grief, seemed genuinely glad for his happiness. As evening fell and the last visitor departed, Eleanor stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Thomas joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. No regrets? He asked softly. Eleanor leaned into him. None, though I reserve the right to accidentally spill something on Mrs. Weber's dress at the church social. Thomas's laugh rumbled through his chest. Margaret would have liked you. You both have that steel beneath the soft. I hope so, Eleanor said quietly. I hope she knows I'll love them well. She knows, Thomas said with certainty. I think she sent you to us, one way or another." They stood together as stars emerged, the house warm with lamplight behind them. Children's voices carrying on the evening air. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, wedding plans, continued gossip, the complex dance of a small community adjusting to change. But tonight, Eleanor felt the truth settle in her bones. She belonged here. Not as a replacement or substitute, but as herself, Eleanor Hartley, soon to be Callahan, a woman who'd traveled 1,000 miles on a lie to find her truth. "Let them whisper," she said suddenly. "We know what we have." Thomas turned her in his arms, kissing her under the vast Wyoming sky. "Yes," he agreed against her lips. "We do." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with wild flowers blooming across the meadow behind the ranch house. Eleanor stood before the mirror in what had been Margaret's room, now hers, wearing the cream silk dress that had caused such pain just weeks ago. Mrs. Bridger and Mrs. Morrison fussed with the buttons while Clara danced around them in her new blue dress. "You look like a princess." Clara breathed. "Doesn't she look like a princess? Mrs. Bridger?" "Better," the old woman said firmly. "She looks like a bride who knows her own mind." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the silk. The dress fit perfectly, as if waiting for her. Thomas had been right. She could feel Margaret's blessing in the way the fabric fell, in the tiny repairs where love had mended tears. "Something old." "Mrs." Morrison said, gesturing to the dress. "Something new." She pinned a silver brooch to Eleanor's bodice. "Something borrowed?" Mrs. Bridger added her own lace handkerchief. "And something blue." Clara proudly produced a small blue ribbon. "For your hair, Sam and I picked it special." Eleanor knelt carefully, letting the child tie the ribbon around a small section of her pinned-up hair. "Perfect. Now I'm ready." "One more thing." Mrs. Bridger pulled out a small wrapped package. "Thomas asked me to give you this." Inside was a simple gold locket. Eleanor opened it to find 2 tiny photographs, Clara and Sam. Their faces serious for the camera, but eyes bright with life. A small note was tucked beneath. "For the woman who brought light back to our lives." Eleanor pressed the locket to her heart, tears threatening her carefully applied powder. These people, this family, how had she lived without them? The ceremony was simple, held in the yard with wildflowers as decoration and mountains as witness. The crowd was small but warm. The Morrisons, Mrs. Bridger, the Changs, Ben Tucker and his family, Reverend Palmer, and a handful of others who'd chosen love over judgment. Mrs. Weber and her circle were notably absent, but Eleanor found she didn't care. Thomas waited by the makeshift altar, Sam beside him as ring-bearer, both in new suits that Eleanor had sewn with secret measurements. When Thomas saw her, his face transformed. Wonder, joy, and something deeper that made Eleanor's steps falter. Mrs. Bridger steadied her with a gentle hand. "That's a man seeing his future," the old woman whispered. "Walk toward it, child." So Eleanor walked, past the few chairs, past the murmuring voices, straight to Thomas. He took her hands, his own trembling slightly. "You came," he said softly, for her ears alone. "I'll always come to you," she replied. Reverend Palmer spoke of second chances, of love that grows in unexpected soil, of families formed by choice as much as blood. Clara stood very still, holding Eleanor's bouquet of columbines and prairie roses. Sam fidgeted but kept the ring safe. When Thomas spoke his vows, his voice was steady. "Eleanor, you entered our lives through misdirection but stayed through choice. You saw our broken places and chose to help heal them, not with force but with patience. You honored what came before while building something new. I promise to love you, to stand beside you, to make you laugh when I can and hold you when I can't. You are not my second choice but my second chance, and I vow to cherish that gift every day." Eleanor had to pause before speaking her own vows, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. "Thomas, I came here lost and found home. You and Clara and Sam showed me that love isn't about being perfect or untouched by grief. It's about choosing each other through the imperfection. I promise to love your children as my own, to honor the memories that built this family while helping create new ones. I vow to stand with you through Wyoming winters and summer droughts, through joy and sorrow, building a life worthy of the trust you've placed in me. The rings? Reverend Palmer prompted. Sam stepped forward solemnly, producing the simple gold bands. As Thomas slipped the ring onto Eleanor's finger, he whispered, "No more wandering. No more hiding," she whispered back, placing his ring. "By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Thomas, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was gentle, appropriate for the audience, but Eleanor felt the promise in it, of nights to come, of shared mornings, of an intimacy built on trust and desire equally. The small crowd erupted in cheers. Clara threw her arms around them both, while Sam attached himself to Eleanor's skirts. "Can we call you Mama now?" Clara asked breathlessly. Eleanor looked to Thomas, who nodded with suspiciously bright eyes. "If you'd like to—" "Mama," Sam said firmly, his clearest word yet. The celebration was modest but joyful. Tables groaned under the weight of brought dishes. Ben Tucker produced a fiddle, and dancing broke out in the grass. Eleanor danced with Thomas, with each child, with Dr. Morrison, who'd saved Clara's life. The sun traced its arc across the sky, and still the party continued. As evening approached, Mrs. Bridger took charge. "Time for the newlyweds to have some privacy," she announced firmly. "Children, you're coming home with me tonight." Clara and Sam had been prepared for this, but Sam still clung to Eleanor. "You'll be here tomorrow?" he asked anxiously. "Every tomorrow," Eleanor promised, "forever and always." The guests departed with knowing smiles and gentle teasing that made Eleanor blush. Soon, she and Thomas were alone, the ranch quiet except for evening birds and the distant low of cattle. "Mrs. Callahan," Thomas said experimentally, pulling her close. "How does it feel?" "Like coming home," Eleanor replied, then laughed. "Though I'm already home, so perhaps like finally having the right name for where I belong." He kissed her then, deeper than before, with no audience to consider. Eleanor melted into him, her hands finding their way into his hair. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. There's dinner too." Eleanor gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "Later," Thomas said roughly. "Eleanor, I need to tell you. That is, tonight." She placed her fingers over his lips. "I know. I'm not a child. Thomas, I understand what marriage means. That's not—" He caught her hand, kissing her fingers. "What I'm trying to say, badly, is that I want you, not from duty or convention, but because you've driven me half mad these past months. Watching you with the children, seeing you master this life, feeling you next to me and not being able to—" He stopped, jaw working. "But I also want you to know there's no rush. We have time now, all the time in the world." Eleanor's heart swelled. This man, so careful with her feelings even in his desire. "Thomas," she said softly, "I've wanted you since that night in the barn. Since before, if I'm honest, the waiting has been its own sweet torture." His eyes darkened. "Eleanor, take me to bed, husband. Show me what it means to be yours." He needed no further invitation, sweeping her into his arms with an ease that made her gasp. "I've wanted to do this properly," he said, carrying her toward the house. "Carry my bride over the threshold." "You're doing wonderfully," Eleanor assured him, then squeaked as he pretended to stumble. "Thomas Callahan." His laugh was young, free. "Just testing your faith in me." "Unshakable," she said, meaning it. Inside, candles waited. Mrs. Bridger's doing, no doubt. The bed was turned down, flowers scattered on the quilt. Eleanor felt sudden nerves. She was 26, well past blushing youth, but still innocent in the ways that mattered. Thomas sensed her tension, setting her down gently. "We really can wait," he said. "I meant that." "I don't want to wait." Eleanor reached for the buttons of her dress. I want to please you." "You please me by breathing." Thomas said simply, "Everything else is discovery." His hands joined hers at the buttons, slowly revealing skin that had never known a man's touch. Eleanor shivered despite the warm evening. Thomas's reverent expression eased her fears. "So beautiful," he murmured. "How did I get so lucky twice?" "Not luck," Eleanor corrected, finding courage to help him with his own buttons. "Choice. We chose each other." What followed was tender and passionate by turns. Thomas was patient, teaching her pleasure before taking his own, whispering endearments against her skin. Eleanor discovered desires she hadn't known existed, ways her body could sing under loving hands. When they finally joined, it was with tears and laughter equally, two souls recognizing their match. Afterward, they lay entwined, sweat cooling on their skin. Eleanor traced the scar on Thomas's shoulder, a bull's horn. He'd told her while he played with her unbound hair. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing his question from days past. "Only that we waited so long." Eleanor replied honestly, though perhaps the waiting made it sweeter. "Everything about you is sweet," Thomas said, then grinned at her raised eyebrow. "And tart, and strong, and occasionally maddening." "Maddening? On our wedding night?" He rolled her beneath him, both of them laughing. "Especially maddening. Wonderfully, perfectly maddening." They made love again, slower this time, learning each other's rhythms. Outside, night deepened, stars wheeling overhead. Inside, two people who'd thought themselves past such joy discovered that life could begin again. No matter how many false starts came before, later, drowsing in Thomas's arms. Eleanor thought about the strange path that had brought her here. A lying letter, a dead man's promise, children who whispered keep her, and a widower who'd learned to love again. Not the fairy tale she'd once dreamed, but something better. A real life, complicated and difficult and absolutely worth every struggle. "What are you thinking?" Thomas asked sleepily. "That I'm glad William Morrison found me too plain and too old." Eleanor said, "If he hadn't, I'd never have found you." Thomas's arms tightened around her. "His loss, my gain. Though remind me to thank him if we ever meet. With your fists, with my heartiest gratitude, the fool gave me everything." Eleanor smiled against his chest, listening to his heart beat steady and strong. Tomorrow would bring the usual challenges. Ranch work, children's needs, perhaps more gossip from town. But tonight, in this bed blessed by memory and renewed by love, she was simply Eleanor Callahan, wife and mother, keeper of hearts and mender of broken places. "I love you," she whispered to her sleeping husband. His response was to pull her closer, murmuring her name like a prayer. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting contentment wash over her. She was home, truly home, in all the ways that mattered. The candles guttered and died, leaving only starlight and shadow. But in the darkness, love burned bright enough to light a lifetime. 3 months into their marriage, Eleanor was teaching Clara to make bread when she heard horses approaching. Through the flower-dusted window, she saw a well-dressed man dismounting from a hired carriage, an unusual sight in these parts. Something about his bearing made her stomach clench with old dread. "Mama? Who's that?" Clara asked, peering around her. Before Eleanor could answer, the man knocked. She opened the door with flowery hands, and her heart stopped. Grady Morrison stood before her, hat in hand, looking prosperous and penitent. "Hello, Eleanor," he said softly. "May I come in?" "Mr. Morrison." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "What are you doing here?" "I've come to make things right." His eyes traveled over her, the flower in her hair, the simple calico dress, the child peering from behind her skirts. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to discuss." Eleanor moved to close the door, but he placed his hand against it. "Please, I've traveled all this way." Surely you can spare a moment for what we once meant to each other. Clara tugged at Eleanor's skirt. Mama? The word seemed to hit Grady like a slap. You have children? I have a family. Eleanor lifted her chin. Clara, go find Sam. Tell him to stay in the barn until I call. The girl looked between them with two wise eyes. Should I get Papa? Your father's in the north pasture, Eleanor said carefully. I'll handle this. Clara went reluctantly, casting suspicious glances back. Eleanor stepped aside, allowing Grady entry but leaving the door open. He surveyed the modest room, the scrubbed floors, the mended furniture, the obvious signs of a working ranch house. So different from what we planned, he said quietly. The house in Lawrence, the social position. What do you want, Grady? He turned to face her, and she saw lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. I made a terrible mistake. Eleanor, after you left, I married Alice Pemberton. You remember her, young, pretty, everything I thought I wanted. His laugh was bitter. She ran off with a traveling salesman after 8 months, took most of my money with her. Eleanor felt a distant pity, but nothing more. I'm sorry for your troubles. Are you? He stepped closer. Because I'm not. It opened my eyes to what I'd thrown away. You were everything a man could want, steady, loyal, loving. I was a fool to let society's expectations blind me. Yes, Eleanor agreed simply. You were. The blunt response made him flinch. I deserve that, but Eleanor, I'm here to make amends. I want you back. We can start over, build the life we should have had. The life you decided I was too plain and too old for? Eleanor's voice remained calm, but her hands clenched in her apron. The life you denied me because I wasn't decorative enough for your ambitions? I've changed. Good for you. I've changed too. She gestured around the room. This is my life now. These people are my family. You married? Grady's face darkened. Some frontier rancher who worked you like a servant? Look at you, Eleanor, flower in your hair, rough hands, living in this. He waved dismissively. You deserve better. I deserve exactly what I have. Eleanor's temper finally sparked. A man who sees my worth, children who call me mother, a home built on love, not appearances. You think this is beneath me? This is everything you were too shallow to offer. Eleanor, be reasonable. No. She stepped back as he reached for her. You be reasonable. You had your chance. You broke our engagement, humiliated me before the entire town, made me feel worthless. That pain drove me here. So I suppose I should thank you. But I owe you nothing else. You choose this hardscrabble existence over comfort? Over returning to civilization? I'd choose love over convenience every time. Eleanor heard horses approaching. That will be my husband now. Indeed. Thomas appeared in the doorway moments later, taking in the scene with narrowed eyes. Sam and Clara flanked him, clearly having fetched him despite Eleanor's instructions. Everything all right? Thomas asked mildly, but Eleanor heard the steel beneath. Grady Morrison, Eleanor said. My former fiancé, he's just leaving. Grady, my husband, Thomas Callahan. Grady looked between them, his expression ugly. This is who you replaced me with? A widower playing house? Thomas moved faster than Eleanor expected, placing himself between her and Grady. I think you've said enough. I'm trying to save her from a mistake. Grady insisted. Eleanor, you can't want this life. Cooking and cleaning for another woman's children, wearing yourself old before your time. Those are my children, Eleanor interrupted fiercely. Mine in every way that matters. And this life you sneer at? I've never been happier. Papa, Sam said clearly. Bad man. Just confused. Son. Thomas never took his eyes off Grady. Mister. Morrison was about to leave. Grady straightened his coat, trying to reclaim dignity. Eleanor, when you come to your senses, I came to my senses the day I left Lawrence. Eleanor moved to stand beside Thomas, Clara and Sam pressing close. Look at us, Grady. Really look. This is what a family looks like. This is what love builds. You can't really choose. She already chose. Thomas said quietly. Months ago. This woman chose us when we were broken and difficult. She stayed through illness and gossip and my own stubborn grief. She made us whole again. His arm came around Eleanor's waist. So yes, sir, she chooses us, and we choose her, every day. Clara, never one to stay quiet long, piped up. Mama makes the best pie, and she teaches me letters, and she sang Sam better when he was scared. Mama! Sam agreed firmly, glaring at Grady with all the ferocity a 5-year-old could muster. Something in Grady's face crumbled. Perhaps he finally saw what he'd thrown away, not just Eleanor, but the capacity for this kind of fierce, inclusive love. When he looked at Eleanor again, defeat shadowed his eyes. You really are happy, he said, not quite a question. Happier than I knew was possible. Eleanor confirmed. I hope you find the same someday, Grady, but you won't find it here. He nodded slowly, replacing his hat. I wish you well, then, all of you. Thomas walked him out, staying on the porch until the hired carriage disappeared down the road. When he returned, Eleanor was sitting at the table, Clara in her lap, Sam leaning against her side. You all right? Thomas asked gently. Eleanor considered the question. Yes, surprisingly, yes, seeing him again. I thought it might hurt. Instead, I just felt grateful. Grateful? That he showed such poor judgment, that he freed me to find you. She met Thomas's eyes. To find all of you. Thomas crossed to her, cupping her face in his work-rough hands. No regrets? He's right that life here is hard. Hard but real. Eleanor turned to kiss his palm. I wouldn't trade a single struggle for all his promised comfort. Why did the mean man say you weren't Mama? Clara demanded. Eleanor and Thomas exchanged glances, having a whole conversation in a look. They'd known this day would come, when the children needed to understand the full truth. Come here, both of you, Eleanor said, making room for Sam on her other knee. Remember I told you I came here by mistake? That man knew me before. When I lived far away, he doesn't understand that families can form in different ways. But you are our Mama, Clara insisted. Yes, sweet girl, I am. Just like your first Mama is still your Mama too. You're lucky enough to have 2 mothers who love you, one watching from heaven, one here to hug you. Sam patted her cheek. Our Mama, always. Eleanor promised, Thomas added. That man thought Mama would want her old life back, but he didn't understand. This is her life now. We're her life. Forever? Clara asked anxiously. Forever and then some. Eleanor confirmed. That evening, after the children were asleep, Eleanor found herself restless. She stood on the porch, watching stars emerge in the vast sky. Thomas joined her, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Talk to me, he said simply. It feels like a door closing. Eleanor mused. The last tie to my old life. Cut clean, I thought I might feel loss. But instead, there's just relief. He was a fool to let you go. Eleanor smiled. Yes, he was, but his foolishness brought me here, so I can't quite hate him for it. I can, Thomas said cheerfully. The way he looked at you, like you were property he'd misplaced. He never saw me. Eleanor turned in Thomas's arms. Not really. He saw what I could do for his standing, his comfort. You see me. I see you. Thomas agreed, voice rough with emotion. Flower in your hair and all. Eleanor laughed, reaching up to dust the forgotten flower away. I must have looked a sight. You looked like home, Thomas corrected. Like the woman who makes my children laugh and my heart race. Like the answer to prayers I didn't know I was praying. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to night sounds, crickets, a distant owl, the wind through grass. Eleanor thought about paths not taken, about the conventional life Grady had offered, about safety and propriety and fitting in. None of it compared to this, standing in Thomas's arms under endless stars, knowing 2 children slept peacefully inside, secure in their love. He'll spread word back in Lawrence. Eleanor said eventually. About finding me here. People will talk. Let them. We know the truth. Which is, Thomas smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face, that Eleanor Callahan is exactly where she belongs. Eleanor rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring all her certainty into the touch. When they finally went inside, she paused to look back at the road where Grady had vanished. Somewhere out there was the life she might have had, safe, conventional, empty. Here was the life she'd chosen, challenging, unexpected, full to bursting with love. No regrets, she whispered to the night. Thomas's hand found hers, warm and sure. No regrets, he agreed. They went inside together, to their home, their children, their carefully built happiness behind them. The door closed firmly on the past. Ahead lay only tomorrows they would face together. Come what may. Winter came gently that year, painting the ranch in silver frost and pristine snow. Eleanor had become a fixture in the valley, teaching at the small schoolhouse, organizing church socials, trading preserves with neighboring ranches. The woman who'd arrived as a scandal had transformed into a pillar of the community. One December morning, she stood in what had been the old barn, now rebuilt as a gathering place. Thomas and the neighbors had worked through autumn to restore it, creating something new from James's legacy. Today, it would host its first event, a Christmas celebration for the valley's children. "Higher, Papa," Clara called, directing Thomas as he hung evergreen garlands. Sam steadied the ladder with serious concentration, now a sturdy 6-year-old who spoke in full sentences. Though still sparingly, Eleanor smiled at the scene, her hand resting unconsciously on her slightly rounded belly. The secret she'd been holding for weeks would be shared today, their own Christmas miracle. "Mrs. Callahan," young Mary Chen rushed in, followed by a stream of children. "Is it true there'll be candy and stories?" "All true," Eleanor confirmed, greeting each child. Even the Weber children were there, their mother having gradually thawed over the months. Not friendly, perhaps, but no longer actively hostile. The barn filled with families, laughter echoing off the restored beams. Eleanor had insisted on including everyone. The Chinese railroad workers' families, the Mexican vaqueros, even the few Negro homesteaders who usually kept to themselves. "Christmas knows no borders," she'd told a skeptical Thomas, who'd eventually supported her wholeheartedly. As she watched Clara help smaller children with paper angels, Eleanor remembered her first days here, the frightened woman stepping off a stagecoach, clutching a fraudulent letter. How far they'd all come. "You've got that look again," Thomas murmured, appearing at her elbow. "What look?" "The one that says you're planning something that'll scandalize the proper folk." Eleanor grinned. "I was thinking we should make this an annual tradition. Maybe add a spring festival too. Bring the whole valley together regularly." "See? Scandalous." But he was smiling. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only twice. You're falling behind." Their gentle teasing was interrupted by Reverend Palmer calling for attention. The Christmas program began, children reciting verses, Clara playing a halting but heartfelt piano piece, Sam surprising everyone by singing Silent Night in his clear, sweet voice. Then came the nativity pageant. Eleanor watched the familiar story unfold with new eyes, one hand pressed to her stomach. New life, new hope, new beginnings. The theme resonated deeply. After the children finished, presents were distributed, simple things, mostly handmade. Eleanor had sewn dolls for the girls, Thomas had carved whistles for the boys. But the real gift was the community itself, gathered in warmth and fellowship. As the celebration wound down, Thomas stood, clearing his throat. "Before folks head home, Eleanor and I have news to share." Eleanor rose beside him, suddenly nervous. "We're expecting a baby. Come summer, Clara and Sam will have a little brother or sister." The barn erupted in congratulations. Clara shrieked with delight. Sam's face split in a huge grin. "Mrs." Bridger wiped away tears, muttering about knowing it for weeks, that glow. even Mrs. Weber offered reserved congratulations. Later, as families departed into the snowy afternoon, Eleanor felt a deep contentment. The barn grew quiet, just their family remaining. Clara spun in circles, making plans for the baby, while Sam solemnly promised to share his toys. "You're not worried?" Thomas asked quietly. They both knew the dangers, Margaret's shadow always near when new life was discussed. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "This baby was conceived in joy. Will be born to a whole family. That makes a difference." Thomas pulled her close. "When did you know?" "About a month ago. I wanted to be sure before telling you." She smiled. "Mrs. Morrison confirmed it last week." "A month of keeping this secret?" "Eleanor Callahan, you become quite the frontier woman. I've had a good teacher." They were interrupted by Clara tugging at Eleanor's skirts. "Mama, will the baby call you Mama too? Or will we have to share?" Eleanor knelt to Clara's level. "Love multiplies, sweet girl. There's enough for everyone." "Like when you came," Sam said thoughtfully. "We got more love, not less. Out of the mouths of babes." Eleanor hugged both children, tears pricking her eyes. These two had taught her so much about resilience, about the heart's infinite capacity for growth. That evening, after the children were asleep, Eleanor and Thomas sat by the fire. She was knitting tiny booties while he mended harness. Domestic peace, hard won. "I've been thinking," Thomas said suddenly, "about the letter." Eleanor looked up. They rarely discussed the fraudulent letter anymore. "What about it?" "We never found out who really wrote it." He set aside the harness. "I made inquiries after you decided to stay, but hit dead ends. James couldn't write much, like I said, and none of his friends admitted to it. Does it matter now?" "I suppose not. Just curious about our matchmaker." Thomas smiled. Whoever they were, they saw what we needed before we did. Eleanor considered this. Maybe it was Margaret. Thomas's hand stilled. "Eleanor. Not literally," she clarified quickly. "But think about it. Someone who knew your family, knew what you'd lost, knew James couldn't write, someone who wanted to see life return to this ranch." She shrugged. "Guardian angel by way of the postal service." "Poetic," Thomas said softly. "Margaret would have liked that notion." They sat quietly. The only sounds the fire's crackle and wind against windows. Eleanor's hand drifted to her belly, where new life grew. In the corner stood the small Christmas tree the children had decorated, its simple ornaments catching firelight. "I found it. You know," Eleanor said suddenly. "The letter, the original." Thomas straightened. "When?" "Last month, tucked in James's Bible. The handwriting. Thomas, it looked like Margaret's." His breath caught. "That's impossible." Eleanor retrieved the Bible from the shelf, extracting the worn letter. Together they studied it in the lamplight. The writing was feminine, careful, similar to the recipe notes in Margaret's books. "But how?" Thomas whispered. Eleanor had a theory, pieced together from Clara's chatter and old dates. What if Margaret wrote it before she died? What if she knew, sensed she might not survive the birth? She could have asked someone to send it later, when you'd had time to grieve. Thomas traced the letters with one finger. "She always said James needed a wife, said the ranch was too much for one man alone." His voice broke. "But to think of you." She thought of her family, Eleanor corrected gently. "Of children who'd need a mother, men who'd need a partner. The details, my name, where to send it, those came from somewhere else. But the impulse? That was love." Thomas pulled her onto his lap, burying his face in her hair. "Two extraordinary women," he murmured. "How did I get so blessed?" They held each other as the fire died to embers. Outside, snow began falling again, blanketing the world in fresh white. The letter lay on the table, mystery solved or deepened, depending on perspective. Either way, it had served its purpose, bringing Eleanor across miles and assumptions to where she belonged. "We should frame it," Thomas said eventually. Hang it where we can see it daily. To remember, to give thanks. The next morning brought clear skies and dazzling snow. Eleanor stood at the window, watching Thomas teach Sam to track rabbits, while Clara built a snow family: father, mother, 2 children, and a small snow baby. Her hand pressed against the glass, wedding ring catching the light. In the reflection, she saw not the plain spinster of Kansas, but a woman transformed by love and purpose. Behind her, the house hummed with life. Bread rising, soup simmering, children's artwork decorating every surface. The framed letter now hung by the door, its faded words a daily reminder. Seeking partnership with kind woman willing to build a life in challenging circumstances. Eleanor smiled. Challenging. Yes, but worth every moment. "Mama," Clara called from outside. "Come see, the snow baby needs a bonnet." Eleanor grabbed her shawl, ready to join her family in the bright morning. As she passed the letter, she touched it gently, a blessing on whoever had written it, wherever they were. Then she stepped into the sunshine, into the laughter of children and the love of a good man, into a life built on broken foundations that had grown stronger for the mending. The woman who'd arrived by mistake had found her destiny. The family formed by loss had discovered joy. And somewhere, perhaps, Margaret Callahan smiled to see her family whole again. Her last earthly wish fulfilled in ways she never could have imagined. Love had found a way, as love always does, traveling through sorrow and confusion to bloom like columbines in spring, wild, resilient, and absolutely beautiful. The fraudulent letter had told the truth after all. A partnership was needed. A life was waiting to be built. That it brought Eleanor specifically was either chance or providence. The Callahans had long since stopped trying to decide which. They simply lived, loved, and gave thanks for the mistake that wasn't a mistake at all. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me by this Wild West campfire to hear Eleanor and Thomas's tale. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, whether it's in your car during a long commute, cozied up in bed, or perhaps even under the stars like our frontier friends. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts about this story of love, loss, and second chances. Did Eleanor's journey touch your heart as it did mine? Let me know in the comments below. Until we meet again around the campfire, sweet dreams and happy trails.